Right now on Upfront.
Show me the money. The highly anticipated campaign finance reports are in. Who's up, who's down in the battle to be Wisconsin's next governor.
Then chaos in Minnesota.
And for anyone that is taking the bait tonight, stop.
Continued protests, clashes between protesters and federal agents.
We did discuss the Insurrection Act. He certainly has the constitutional authority to utilize that.
Now, the new proposal from a Democratic candidate for governor to ban ICE agents in parts of Wisconsin, and the pushback from the governor.
Banning things will absolutely ramp up.
With us this Sunday, Democratic Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez and Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany.
Then stock trading ban.
Well, today, the rubber hits the road.
Congress a step closer to new restrictions targeting themselves. The bill's sponsor, Congressman Brian Stile, is with us. And data center debate.
While data centers have come here, there are an awful lot of things that people have concerns about.
The new bill set for a vote, and the new group promising to fight for clean energy. Former Democratic state lawmaker Peter Barca on the group's launch just moments away.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. The receipts are in. Who's up, who's down in the big fundraising race in the battle for governor?
Of the more than half dozen Democrats in the race, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley topping the list, $789,000 raised, which includes transfers from his Milwaukee County exec campaign. Following Crowley, Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, $618,000, Joel Brennan, $566,000, Mandela Barnes, $555,000, and Missy Hughes, Francesca Hong, and Kelda Royce, all under $500,000.
For Republicans, Congressman Tom Tiffany with a big lead, raising $2.1 million with $20,000 donations from each of the Republican mega donors, Diane Hendricks, Dick Uihlein, and Liz Uihlein. Washington County Executive Josh Schoeman reporting $535,000 raised.
Tom Tiffany and Sarah Rodriguez are both standing by with us. We begin with Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez. Lieutenant Governor, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with the state of the campaign as we're seeing these fundraising numbers come in. I'm curious from your perspective, who is the front runner in this Democratic primary here in January?
So I am just so grateful for the outpouring of support that I have received from all 72 counties. People are ready for a change. They're ready for somebody to lead Wisconsin forward, and I'm just really excited about it.
Reported raising $650,000 in the last half of 2025. Is there a threshold that you think candidates should have raised by now, this January benchmark, or else consider dropping out of this race?
You know, those are always individual decisions for individual candidates. Everybody is going to look at their numbers and decide whether they want to continue to move forward. I'm happy with where we're at. This is where we expected to be. And yeah, I'm just really excited to continue to go all across the state of Wisconsin, visiting all 72 counties, doing listening sessions in every single county, no matter how small. We are showing up and making sure we're listening to Wisconsinites.
Let's talk about your ICE proposal that you put out this past week as we continue to see what's developing in Minnesota. You would like to ban civil immigration arrests in places like courthouses, hospitals, daycares, schools, and churches, to name a few. I first want to get your reaction to what Governor Evers said related to your proposal. Take a listen.
We can take a look at that, but I think, banning things will absolutely ramp up the actions of our folks in Washington, D.C. They don't tend to approach those things appropriately, and so we're very, very vigilant. I'm not sure that we have the ability to do what the Lieutenant Governor is doing or want to do. So we'll see.
I'm curious your response to the governor.
So this is one area that I respectfully disagree. I believe that we do have the ability to be able to create transparency and standards in the state of Wisconsin. We have seen other states that are doing this. They are working quickly to protect their residents. It's something that I would like to see Wisconsin do as well. And I have so much respect for Governor Evers, and I 100% understand where he's coming from. But this is something that I think we need to be leaders on, and we need to be protecting the folks here in Wisconsin.
How do you know that this is a legal proposition here?
So we've had lawyers look at what we can and cannot do. There is currently legislation sitting within the Assembly that looks very specifically at this, and they had a legal opinion drawn up for it. So I do think it is legal to do this, and I think we should move forward to protect Wisconsinites.
Given what we're continuing to see play out in Minnesota, would you urge Wisconsinites to obstruct federal ICE agents?
Absolutely not. I would never, ever urge Wisconsinites to obstruct federal agents. And in fact, that is something that I absolutely would discourage people to do. What I encourage them to do is to continue to do what they have been doing, which is peacefully protest, as well as making sure that you are using your video camera on your phone and taping them to make sure that we can hold these agents accountable if they do violate people's civil rights.
Well, what type of guidance would you issue as governor to state employees in terms of how to deal with ICE and federal immigration officials broadly?
So the guidance that I would give to state employees is to ask if they have, that they have a warrant signed by a judge. That is something that we can do on state property to say that if they have a warrant signed by a judge, then we are able to make arrests within, that particular environment. But if it's an administrative warrant only, that's issued just by ICE, it's not issued with a judge's signature, then that is something that we can use as a safe haven. So to making sure that they're following the law and that everybody gets due process.
As you know, Homeland Security officials say their goal in these operations is to find and arrest criminals who are here in the country illegally. Do you support that effort, and would Wisconsin assist with that if you were governor?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have individuals who are criminals and are here and they are undocumented, that is the goal of ICE, is to be able to remove those individuals as a public safety concern. But that is not what we are seeing all across the U.S. What we are seeing are indiscriminate raids. We are seeing citizens being picked up and that they don't even have a warrant for that person because they weren't looking for that person because they are a U.S. citizen. I mean, look, these are the kind of things that are really scary to Wisconsinites. And I'm hearing that from my constituents is they want to make sure we are reining in the abuses that we are seeing all across the U.S. and that we don't want that coming to Wisconsin.
Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, Democratic candidate for governor. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, with that, let's bring in Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany. Congressman, welcome back to Upfront. Good to see you.
Good to join you guys again.
So a lot to talk about. Let's start with these fundraising numbers. You're reporting raising about $2.1 million. Josh Schoeman was reporting more than $500,000. What do you think that these numbers say and show about the state of this primary race?
Yeah, really pleased with the support that we're seeing, and those numbers bear that out. We raised twice as much as any candidate, Republican or Democrat, and I think it shows that we have strong support. People contributed from all 72 counties, and there's thousands of people that have given. And I think it just really identifies the movement that we've started here in Wisconsin, where we want to reduce red tape on Wisconsinites, lower taxes, and let's make Wisconsin more affordable.
Let's talk about ICE. We'll get to Wisconsin in a moment. First, I'm curious your thoughts as we look at what continues to develop in Minnesota. Would you support the president invoking the Insurrection Act at any point?
There really is no reason to have the Insurrection Act be put in place if Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis would just call for peace over in Minnesota. They have taken the side of the lawless rather than law enforcement. And it's important to remember that immigration and customs enforcement, it is their job under federal law to remove people who are here illegally in the United States of America. That is their job that they must do. And I think it's important for people to look at a number of the people that have been detained in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, to take a look at their rap sheets. I mean, there's people with homicide on their records, burglary, rapists, and others. That's who they're removing from the streets of Minnesota.
When you look broadly at some of the videos that have been posted, do you have any concerns about what's developing from a Homeland Security or federal perspective in Minneapolis at this point?
you always want law enforcement to live within their mandate. But I mean, we've seen what has happened. I grew up in the shadow of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, two great cities, a couple of the most desirable cities to live in the United States of America. 20 years ago. They're in steep decline now, and a big part of the reason is because of the lawlessness that is allowed to go on by the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota.
We heard from Lieutenant Governor Rodriguez say that she wants ICE agents to have a judicial warrant in order to enter places like courthouses and schools. If their goal is to arrest criminals who are in the country illegally, why shouldn't they have that?
Under the law, the federal law enforcement, they have the duty to remove people who are here illegally in the United States. And they need to be able to do their job. It's no different than your county sheriff doing his job. And for the life of me, I don't understand where the lieutenant governor is coming from when you see a woman who was beaten to a pulp by an illegal immigrant in Prairie du Chien, 2 teenagers that were killed in Dane County by a second offense illegal alien drunk driver who should have been removed from our state, the burglaries that are going on in Delafield. Those are the type of people that should be removed from this country, and that is the job of federal law enforcement to do it. And I would say that Lieutenant Governor Rodriguez perhaps should take her cues from Governor Evers, who even he distanced himself from her comments this week.
Yeah, what would ICE's presence in Wisconsin look like if you were governor?
ICE would. It would be similar to what we saw just in this past week, where there were people interdicted here in Wisconsin that are here illegally, and they were removed from the state of Wisconsin because they had committed crimes either in their home country or here in the state of Wisconsin. We should work with federal law enforcement to remove those who are here illegally, especially those who have committed violent crimes.
As you've been out on the campaign trail across Wisconsin, I'm curious what you're hearing from Wisconsinites, especially when you look to the dairy industry. We've heard concerns, whether it be some Democrats or even Senator Johnson, about immigration's impact on Wisconsin's industry. What are you hearing from voters out across the state related to this?
You know what? I talk to farmers a lot, and I come from a farm family and still have brothers and sisters that are in agriculture. And, you know, they certainly want to know what is happening, but they do not want to have illegal aliens on their farm that are violent criminals. And most are not. But there are a few that are, and they don't want to have them there. I think one of the most important things we can do is implement work requirements. We have so many Americans, the estimate is as high as 10 million people across America, that are choosing not to work. There's a lot of people that can do those jobs if we would implement work requirements. If the federal government doesn't do it, as governor, I will implement work requirements. They can fill some of those jobs that are available here in our state.
Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany. Congressman, like always, we appreciate it. Thank you.
To join you guys this weekend.
Up next, Congress closer to some new big restrictions on stock trading. The bill's sponsor, Congressman Brian Stile, is standing by next.